How you all doing, guys? Welcome back to Retrospect, your go-to retro gaming podcast. Today, we're recording episode 66, and we have another cool guest today named Tom Tilley, who you may have seen across our website creating very impressive modifications. Tom, thank you for joining. I know you're based in Australia, so it's a little late for you, but we're happy to have you on the podcast today.
Yeah, no, thank you for your kind invite. I'm very pleased to be here.
Yeah, no worries. So just give our audience a kind of brief description of what you do, because no doubt me and Seb will absolutely screw it.
By day, I'm a software developer. I was an academic for about 10 years or so, and before that, I was a facsimile and analog mobile phone technician for a number of years. And so I picked up some basic electronics at that time, and that's back in the days of the old analog mobile phones. So a lot of people are surprised at how buff I am for a computer scientist, but that's because I used to like really did like phones when I was a tech. So I've got a bit of a mixture of a little bit of electronics, so a little bit of hardware and software background, and I love putting those together just to kind of like have some geeky fun. And build some things that sometimes seem a bit obvious to me, or I'm surprised that other people haven't already done them. It's just some good geeky fun for me.
That's what I love the most about your work. I think the fact you just said then that these are things that you think are obvious that other people haven't come up with, like as you know, writing the article about you, looking at the things that you create, the work that you do. Your thought process is fascinating me so much, and we're going to get into a lot of that in this podcast. One thing I want to touch on already is the fact that you started by day, I am this. I mean, you kind of sounded like the retro gaming Batman for a second there, Tom, and that to me has already got me excited. Let's tick off the things that you are and do and have done. Mobile phone technician, computer scientist, hardware hacker, the things you've invented. I don't know whether you've realised, but with your work, some of the videos that we're going to talk about in this podcast as we go through, like you've made some serious waves in the retro gaming scene. I know some of the guys who work closely with us, another member of the team. Questions for you, excitable that we're getting you on this podcast, and it's great to talk to you about some of the things you've been working on and what you've been, just tap into that brain of yours and just figure out, how you make the things you do and why you do it. When did you first sort of think you were going to get a love for, let's start with computer science. So when did you first discover your love of computer science? Is that something that you kind of fell into? Is it something that, from a young age you were like, I want to do this, I want to be working and pioneering in this field? Where does that have any link into retro gaming as well? Did the two collide at an early age?
Yeah. I grew up in a little country town here in South Australia, which is the worst possible place for me to grow up because I'm asthmatic, and so I was surrounded by wheat and animals with hair and all sorts of things. And I had three older brothers who were great sportsmen, and I was this kind of like wimpy kind of asthmatic kid. And so I'm not sure if that sort of immediately destined me for the path of computing. But I talked someone who was babysitting us into buying a VIC-20 at the time. So that's kind of like, dates me age-wise. And then, when I sort of managed to get, when I managed to get a little bit of money for myself, I bought myself an SX64, so that was gaming as well as just like, wow, here's something that you can understand what's going on to a large extent, and you can like control this box. It's kind of like a magic box. And so, just programming sprites and trying to write games and all those sorts of things, as well as like playing games during that era. I was planning to go to university to study computer science out of high school, but fell into this facsimile technician job like you do, and ended up doing that for 8 years. But ended up as a service manager, and whenever I'd pick up the phone, it was someone who was looking for a fight, and it was my job to sort them out. The buck stopped with me. And so, after 8 years, I kind of went, well, I love the technical side of fixing things, and, bug hunting is, kind of exciting. Trying to work out how something works and, why it's gone wrong. But dealing with the public was kind of doing my head in, and I thought, well, computing's what I always wanted to do. So at the mature age of 25, I sort of reapplied to go back to university and got accepted into computer science, which is what I kind of always wanted to do. Hung around at universities long enough to then, get a PhD in software engineering. Worked as an academic for a while, mostly overseas in northern Thailand with my family, which was an amazing time and a very creative time. And then, back here to Australia for coming up for 9 years, back here in Australia. And I wondered if moving back from Thailand, the kind of creativity might end. But, that's just kind of continued with the Giant Game & Watch and sort of various things since. So, that's kind of me, if that answers that question.
Lovely. What? When did you find that you were becoming curious to mod gaming peripherals, and when was your first kind of documented invention that you put on the internet, so to speak?
Yeah. So I was trying to think about this earlier, and there are two different points in time. So I remember around my 30th birthday, and I've got two kids now, sort of grown up in their sort of late 20s, but at the time, two young kids, I remember playing a lot of Wonder Boy at the time.
Nice, good choice.
I had an old keyboard that I think I grabbed from a garage sale and managed to find like an old QuickShot joystick. And I ended up wiring the QuickShot joystick into like four of the keys, essentially on the scanning for the keyboard, so I could play Wonder Boy, and maybe Midtown Madness was around at that same kind of time, using this kind of like very crusty QuickShot joystick, and it had a lot of ghosting, and it didn't work really well, but the idea was kind of there. We moved to Melbourne. Here after I kind of finished my PhD and was wrapping up my PhD, we moved down to Melbourne for a couple of years. And there's a magical time of year there called Hard Rubbish Collection. I don't know if something similar happens in the UK, but basically it's a week where if you've got like a fridge or whatever, you put it out like on the side of the road on the curb, and the local council will send trucks out to pick up all of the bigger the lounges and everything else. And so, of course, people like hit the streets with kind of like electric drills and sort of like pulling all the memory out of the computers and any cards they can find and so on. And so my kids and I, we went out and we got an old VCR, an old printer, 3 vacuum cleaners, a bit of wood, and we turned the wood into a hovercraft. We managed to get one of the vacuum cleaners working, and we built this kind of like small hovercraft.
Okay. We're going to have to unpack that before you carry on. You made a hovercraft out of some wood and a vacuum cleaner. Brandon, two things are going to happen from this. One, this is going to be the longest podcast ever, and two, I think we both need to go back to university, start, and then do this again.
I think the UK needs to start this big rubbish thing. I want a hovercraft.
I mean, we've got that up north. You just leave your stuff outside, and the guy comes around for it's like scrap metal collectors and stuff like that. You've got your guy coming around.
Not your big stuff like fridges and TVs, though.
Oh man, if you put a fridge or a TV outside up north, then somebody will come round with a truck and it'll be gone. Yeah.
Bloody hell! I put out some mud in my green waste bin, right? That is for like grass and plants, and they didn't take it for 3 months. I almost got fined. Let alone putting a bloody radiator out on the road. They'd shoot me.
Tom can't make a hovercraft with mud, though. I mean, he might be able to. I don't know. Wow. But if there was any electrics in there, if you've got like a hairdryer and some TV parts and a skateboard, it's probably going to be able to make something with that. But yeah, maybe mud is a problem. But what is the process behind? You've just blown my mind, Tom. You made a hovercraft out of wood and a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. Okay. So. I mean, growing up, in the back of comic books, there were always the ads for, build your own hovercraft or 8-foot tall monster or all those sorts of things, which I was always fascinated by, but, never sent away for my free monkey or any of those things. But so, when we saw the vacuum cleaners, I just kind of thought, what can we do with this that's going to be like, fun? And essentially you just need to modify the path for the vacuum cleaner so you're blowing air instead of just sucking. So essentially like getting the exhaust part of that into a useful kind of stream. A circle of wood that's big enough, in this case, my son could stand on it or just sit on it to ride it around. So you're not like heading down to the shops or anything like that on it. But it's covering it in black plastic, and then you need something like the lid from a coffee can or something similar to go in the centre. And then a few bits of reinforcing tape, and essentially what you're going to do is blow air into the top, cut a few like coin-size holes close to the centre in the middle, so that when the air blows in, the coffee can is going to, the plastic lid is going to hold the centre in to make like a donut shape underneath, and air will then blow out and flow underneath to give you a kind of a cushion of air. And it sounds like an industrial sander or something. It's very, very noisy. But you can like sit someone on it and, push them around the floor. So my son ended up like taking this into school, and they kind of like, the kids played with it in the gymnasium, like pushing kids around the room and all that sort of thing. So yeah, just
Brilliant.
Something kind of geeky and fun. So
all I'm thinking is Brandon is a new father, aren't you? So I'm just imagining.
Congratulations! I heard that on I think the last podcast before you guys took a break. So
Yeah, thank you. He's not obsessed with things yet. I mean, he'll just pick up toys and throw it around, but I can imagine in a couple of years he's going to want certain specific things that I might have to get a little bit hands-on with. So you might get a couple of emails in a couple of years, Tom, to figure out how to make a hovercraft out of mud.
Sure.
I'm just imagining Kate being like, Brandon, why is our child on a hovercraft in the living room? And you'd be like, it's all right, love, I'll sort it.
Yeah, well, back in 2024, I spoke with a very we'll see what I come up with. But one major, and probably I can imagine it's one of the biggest projects you made, quite literally, is the world's largest Game & Watch.
Yes.
What was the initial idea of that? How did you come up with the concept? I guess what pain point triggered you to go, you know what, I'm going to build this? Or was it another rubbish day and someone just happened to have a giant screen that looked like a Game & Watch?
That they were throwing out. When we moved back to Australia, I'd been to a maker fair overseas, and I'm not sure, a maker fair is a thing in the UK, or are you familiar with the concept?
Yeah, they're not as popular here as like America, but yeah.
Okay. But I'd been to a maker fair overseas, and then when we moved back to Australia, there was a maker fair happening here, and I thought, oh, fantastic. I'll take some stuff along just to sort of like to share with people, and so I took along a coffee grinder that I'd hooked up to play Puzzle Bobble, and a multiplayer Guitar Hero setup where you can get up to 10 people playing Guitar Hero with sort of one button each, essentially like splitting out one controller into 5 people, and so in a head-to-head mode you have 10 people playing. So I took those along, and then for the next year I thought, I want something sort of geeky and fun to take along. And when we came back to Australia, a couple of people were kind enough to give us 2 televisions, one of which had like an intermittent pink streak down the side of the TV. So it was really kind of like unusable, but I thought, oh, well, I can most probably fix that. But if not, what's something that would kind of fit like into that sort of like picture? And I'm kind of trapped in the 80s. I grew up in the golden age of, arcade games and all those sorts of things, and love 80s music. And my kids have been fed a constant diet of 80s movies and 80s music. So I thought, giant things are always kind of like novel and fun. Why don't I turn this slightly dodgy TV into a giant Game & Watch? And the screen itself, the proportions might fit. So even if I can't fix this pink kind of like line down the side, I could still, most probably display a reasonable size screen out of it. So that's kind of how I started out. I wanted something for Maker Faire 2017 here in Adelaide to take along, and I thought I'll build a giant Game & Watch. And I still have it on the shelf, kind of here behind me is my original sort of octopus that an aunt brought back for us when I was maybe like 11 or 12 years old after an overseas trip. She very kindly kind of brought this back as a gift. So I have a very soft spot for Octopus, which is a great game in terms of it's got a really nice balance of risk and reward kind of in it as a game. And so I thought I'll build a giant Game & Watch Octopus for Maker Faire.
I love that that's like the first thing that pops into your head. I'm going to build a giant version of this game. And obviously like it's people have, from all over the globe, I've seen reactions to it over the years and they've absolutely loved it. I mean, how... For me, that task, obviously I love retro gaming, I love gaming. I wouldn't say I'm great with the kind of, I like my DIY, but I don't think I'd know where to start in doing something like that. So how, take us back to you sitting down, pen, paper, the building stage, you're thinking about the design process. How easy was it to get the materials together? What kind of costs are involved with doing something like that? And, did that to you at the time seem like an absolutely mammoth task, or were you always quite convinced that, like, I can knock this out in the space of a month? Was there any kind of doubt in your mind as to how long that would take, or were you just like, I can see this vision from the very beginning, I'm going to do this is going to come out, and it came out like you hoped it would?
Yeah, I think I kind of had the vision. I kind of really sort of, I think, understood how most of the parts worked. So around that time, I'm not sure if you've ever seen, around the time I started kind of working on this, so I was about 6 months out from Maker Faire. So I thought, I've got a reasonable amount of time to work on something. There was a website that a Polish design studio put up that I think it was called Hippopotams, handheld games, and they had emulators that they had written that were really like quite faithful to the original games. But so they had split screen Donkey Kong and Octopus was in there and so on. I thought, well, here I can get access to a flash emulation of the game. So I've got that. I've got plenty of experience just interfacing, hacking joysticks to interface buttons to kind of like do other things and glue bits together. Sort of software-wise. So I thought, well, all I have to do is really build a giant Game & Watch and put those bits inside. The largest unanswered question for me was how to kind of recreate the brushed aluminium look. And I had a little Hyundai i30, a little hatchback car, and at the time we were living about an hour south of where Maker Faire was being held. So to fit a nearly 2 metre giant Game & Watch into the back of the little hatchback, I had to think very carefully about how I could actually make this thing portable. So I'm not sure if you've seen pictures online, but essentially the body of it folds in half, and sort of between the wheelbase, there's about 6 centimetres to spare, and this thing just slots in really nicely, folded in half. But that meant I needed to be able to cover it in something that was going to be foldable, ideally some kind of material. And serendipitously, my mother-in-law had these gold curtains that she was wanting to get rid of. She was very happy to donate them to the cause. So having been thinking about this and looking at them for a while, my mother-in-law came up with these gold curtains that were perfect. And, they've got the right kind of sheen and whatever to look a lot like the original. The colour's perfect to look like the brushed aluminium that you would find on a Game & Watch Octopus. And so that solved that problem in terms of having a plywood frame that sat around a TV with suitable supports in the back that I could... I had an octagonal top and bottom bumpers that you would put on to help hold it straight as well. And then you pop those off, and then the whole body kind of folds in half. And then there's just a support frame that held the TV, and that sort of sat on sort of in front of that. So... they're kind of the major challenges. The flash code was written in Polish, and was only available online. So I had to mod that. So I had to work out how to get it offline. And I'm hitting up Google Translate to translate, all these Polish variable names and things for arm and player and, things you would expect to find inside of like an Octopus game into English, so I could then understand the code to sort of like just mod it and be able to get it to the resolution that I wanted offline to be able to fill my screen and play it on this game. So initially I did the Flash version, but then around the time that I started, MAME actually started successfully dumping the ROMs for the first time from Game & Watch machines. I think they've now got like close to a full set available. And so when Flash was eventually being killed off, then I converted the machine to added in the alarm and time reset buttons, kind of hooked those up as well, and then was able to use the MAME implementation. So rather than having an emulation that looked very faithful to the Game & Watch, I was able to actually run a simulation. And there's a video online somewhere that I did just showing how, the real Game & Watch and the giant one just staying in sync, because it's the same code that's running. It's very, very cool.
Yeah, nice. I guess one of the big questions, and one that our friend Jason came up with, is where do you go from this? So he wants you to make a giant dual screen one, maybe Donkey Kong or something like that. Do you think that is even possible?
I don't think it is, because I'm married. And my beautiful wife has been very supportive over the years, as you can maybe imagine. After the Game & Watch kind of like made it into Guinness World Records, then local radio sort of and the local paper sort of got interested and things like that. And I got a few calls afterwards, and I actually got invited to Australian Fashion Week to bring along my giant Game & Watch.
This is news I didn't know. This is exciting.
Everyone wants a giant Game & Watch at Australian Fashion Week, and they essentially had a street party, and they wanted just fun and different things kind of at their street party. While I was there, I was like shuffling bits backwards and forwards to the car, and one of these octagonal bumpers fell over and like got damaged. And so, I had a damaged bumper, and then I also took the giant Game & Watch to talk to a retro gaming group here in Adelaide. And on the way there, I hadn't packed the car carefully enough, and I broke the screen. And so, it took me about 18 months to work out. I tried modding it a couple of times for some different screens and ended up tracking down a second-hand screen that was the same as the original one that I'd built. But all this time, it's kind of like sitting there in our garage, taking up space, which my wife was not very happy about. So I figure a dual-screen Game & Watch would most probably take up twice as much space and at least twice as many TVs, and I'm not sure my marriage would survive, so...
What I'm hearing, Brandon, is that it could be possible. He's not going to do it, but I'm hearing that it could be possible.
Lots of consequences with that one.
So, guys, that's not a no. It's just a not right now. That's what I'm taking from this, and that's probably the headline that I'll use it for the remainder of the articles that I write for the rest of the... No, I'm joking, Tom. I'm joking. But that's fascinating.
Pre-MAME, I did build a simple proof of concept using a couple of iPads. And a VNC, a remote kind of connection tool. So just using some orange manila folders, and I made a quite convincing, at first glance, dual screen Donkey Kong, which was playable just with an external kind of like gamepad. So certainly there's a proof of concept there, but yes, I don't think I have the space in our current rental to actually build anything like that, even if my wife would entertain the idea.
You talking about iPads there just made me think about, that now that emulators are becoming far more open and available on Android and iOS. I guess will kind of that ever make it into any of your modifications? Because I guess, like you said, with two iPads, admittedly that's not affordable, but you could buy some scrap iPads and do something there, I guess, to make it a little bit more miniature.
Yeah, I guess it would depend. I've got some ideas. I've got an old. I love garage sales and op shops or thrift shops, and so I've got an old VCR, an old camcorder with an eyepiece that I suspect actually still has a CRT in the eyepiece for that particular camera. And I've got some ideas for a very cool steampunk controller. And that would actually feature prominently as this tiny screen with a nice big lens, so you can actually see what's happening. But so kind of reusing some things like that, certainly. And so I guess it would be, just really looking around. If there was an idea that needed a screen of that size, maybe an iPad or something like that would be the go. And certainly with things like VNC, you can hook it up to anything if you weren't actually emulating it on the device itself. So there's lots of options. So yeah.
Speaking of, you mentioned MAME a second ago. I think before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about how you're sat in your creative room now, and you were saying that when I wrote the article about your daughter was saying if only they knew that the secret laboratory was just the room that you're in. But in Tom Tilley's secret laboratory, just behind you right now, you were saying that you've done some tabletop arcade cabinets that you built yourself, and you were talking about how that was kind of like were you saying that was like pre-MAME, or were you stuck a Raspberry Pi in that? The one that's just right behind for our video podcasters. Right behind Tom there. There's a little.
Yeah, over my shoulder it's a second countertop that sort of I've built, but yeah, both of those have been, since kind of MAME. I remember being at university when MAME was first released, and it could fit on a floppy disk with a couple of ROMs still. It was amazing, at times the retro community are kind of mortified with me because pre-MAME, I was driving to work one day. This is when I was still a technician, and I saw an asteroids cabinet out in the rain, kind of in the yard of a company that kind of rents jukeboxes and video game machines. So I took note of the company name, and this was still in the days of the yellow pages, so I kind of looked them up and gave them a call, and I said, look, I saw this asteroids cabinet sort of in your yard. I had no idea what I wanted to do with it, but I thought, here's an asteroids cabinet, this is fantastic. And so I gave them a call, and my brother organised a trailer, and we picked it up sort of during lunchtime. But this was all pre-MAME by sort of like quite a few years, so I thought, what can I do with this thing? And so I actually turned it into a giant fish tank. I think Pizza Hut at the time, I think, had these kind of Land Before Time dinosaurs, and one of those their Tyrannosaurus looked suitably Godzilla-esque. So I drilled the nose out and put the bubble blower in there, so it had like Godzilla with bubbles coming at his nose and so on. And Player 1 and Player 2 were hooked up to the marquee, which was a grow light, and to Godzilla. But people are mortified online that I would take an asteroids cabinet and turn it into a fish tank. Fortunately, a guy who was a collector and setting up kind of his own arcade, just sort of in his basement at home, he bought it and converted it back into a working asteroids cabinet. So kind of all was not lost. So yeah.
You could probably still play Doom on a fish tank that was in an arcade cabinet, so you could have always had a tiny screen to the side and had Fish Doom going at the same time, yeah.
That would have been cool, so yeah. I'm sure there was an 80s show called Whiz Kids where they had like a monitor, it would have been like a CRT, behind a fish tank just running some sort of like line, very Quicks-like sort of bouncing screensavers. Quicks, who even knows how that's pronounced? I remember thinking that was really cool as a kid. So I should have gone for the monitor behind, although it may not have actually sat in the corner very nicely.
One thing I want to talk about is your TED talk that you did a few years ago now. Some of our listeners may have not seen it, but I think you turned was it a bug zapper, or was it a kind of tennis racket into a Guitar Hero controller? Yeah, so in Asia, and maybe they're sort of more widely available now as well, but we were living in northern Thailand, and these bug zapping tennis rackets are a lot of fun and very, very common. But essentially
a bunch of capacitors and some batteries in them, and you hold down the button and kind of like hit a mosquito and it disappears in a puff of blue smoke. It's very, very satisfying. It's hard to buy, or at the time it was hard to buy genuine kind of like shrink wrap software in Thailand, and when you bought a PS2 it came pre-mod chipped. That's just kind of like the nature of the industry there at the time. And I wanted to play... Guitar Hero had just come out. I wanted to play Guitar Hero, but I didn't have access either to... we had a PlayStation 2 we'd bought for my son, but we didn't have access to a plastic guitar. And so I thought, I'll make one out of a bug zapper. And the buttons went through a few iterations, and I found this... I thought, what am I going to do for star power? You know, how am I going to get that working? And... I didn't actually know where the electronics store part of town was as yet. But we went to this kind of store that had all sorts of bizarre spare parts and things. And they had this device that's for drink driving. And you hang it over your ear. And when you kind of like, when your head nods off, then it makes this kind of like ear-piercing scream to make you kind of like wake up and kind of keep your eyes on the road. And
That's a torture device, isn't it?
Yeah, well, pretty much. And I thought, there's obviously a tilt mechanism in there. And so I bought one of these for like $3 Australian or something. And sure enough, there was a mercury switch inside. And so I was able to use that to get like star power working on my like bug zapper guitar. That worked really well. It was a lot of fun. I just used a cheap Chinese DualShock controller as the basis of that I built into the body of it. And the first time I gave it to my son to have a go, he was very wary of actually touching the thing because he was aware of what it does to mosquitoes. And a few people online have suggested maybe it needed like a switch in the back. You could do some operant conditioning or something, and sort of if you want to force someone to become a very, very good Guitar Hero player, you turn on the bug zap mode, and if they kind of miss any notes, then
Listen, all the greatest musicians have probably had like a bit of an electric shock while playing in the rain, right? So you're just creating that kind of Guns N' Roses, style rock concert Wembley kind of thing in the rain. That TED Talk the TED Talk's incredible. It's got so many amazing things in there. Like touching on a few, I saw your son laying over a table with with some controls to play a motorcycling game, I think.
That's
and then the bamboo
up here on the one of the few things I brought back from Thailand. But that's actually that controller's up here on the shelf behind me. So yeah.
So you still got that. There's the bamboo racing car. The fact that you made a Dance Dance Revolution mat out of wood. It's just and like I said in the start of this podcast, it's amazing. You just saying, oh yeah, I just thought I'll grab this and make that. That's what I love. That's what we really wanted to touch into on this podcast. Like, your thought process behind just, oh yeah, that's fine. I'll grab some wood and make this. Like, I think 99% of people just wouldn't think, oh yeah, well, I'll grab some wood and get a joystick and take this. Like, out of all those things, what's the favorite thing you've hacked out of the things you've done? Like all those things on the TED Talk. And I feel like I should have started this by saying that not only have we got a TED Talk, someone who's done a TED Talk, but also a Guinness World Record holder as well. We should have bumped this. Not only is he buff from carrying mobile phones, but he's also in the Guinness World Records as well. It's a fantastic achievement, Tom.
Man of many talents.
Yeah, man of many talents, exactly. But what out of all those things that you've done, including things on the TED Talk that you've hacked, and what would you like to hack next? What's been your favourite? What's coming up in your mind? What solutions have you thought for new things that you've been gaming with? Tell us a little bit about all that.
Yeah. In terms of new things, I'm a little reluctant to give away sort of some future ideas in case anyone gets the jump on me. But
true.
But there's always, I've got maybe 2 or 3 kind of ideas, and if I have an idea, like if inspiration strikes, I'll kind of like jot that down, and maybe a few kind of like related thoughts. There's always something kind of like bubbling away, kind of in the back of my mind. And I guess we can talk about the process for a few of those things. What would be the favourite? I'm really pleased with how the monkey, a Super Monkey Ball controller, just how that came together quite quickly, and especially when I sort of like just got the legs working recently. That was about a week ago, I think. Just very cool.
Tell us more about that one. How did that come about? Did you just you a lover of Monkey Ball?
I wasn't a huge Super Monkey Ball fan necessarily. I love kind of like the mechanic. When we were in Thailand, outside of a cinema, there were 2 linked armadillo racing cabinets, and I don't know if you've seen armadillo racing, but it's got something like a small sort of like bowling ball in it, and it's a lot of fun. You've got 2 armadillos you need to steer around a track, and as you roll, if you get going fast enough, your armadillo rolls up into a ball, and so you're like hitting this trackball. It's got a lot of inertia, and you're like steering this armadillo around a track. I think it's a game from Namco, and you're going head to head, like with you can link up to 4 cabinets. And I thought it'd be a lot of fun to try and recreate this controller, and so. One of the fun things I'd had the opportunity to do in Thailand, I was teaching at one of the local universities. I got to run a game controller hacking elective a couple of times.
Nice.
And so one of the project ideas I gave to some students was to actually use a basketball with some deodorant roller bearings, which is what you see sort of ultimately in that Monkey Ball controller, to play Marble Madness, just using like an optical mouse kind of underneath. And so, I'd had that sort of earlier idea, and I thought, oh, well, that's cool. I can just do the same thing. We had a soccer. I have no idea where the soccer ball came from, but we had a soccer ball around, and so I just kind of worked things out size-wise. I was assuming I'd be able to pick up the movement of the soccer ball optically, just with a mouse kind of mounted underneath. But that didn't actually work well enough. But by putting another deodorant ball on top of that, essentially you're turning it back into a ball mouse. And so the ball sits on top of that, held in place by 3 other deodorant rollers. And as you move the soccer ball, then you could play Marble Madness, you could play Armadillo Racing, which is what I set it up to do. But then once that sort of got online, then people said, oh, you should play Katamari Damashi with it, or you should play Super Monkey Ball with it. And so I hooked it up to play Katamari, and Twitter loved it, and that was a lot of fun, and it just felt so intuitive to play that way, because you've got a character on the screen that's kind of rolling around this ball, and you're rolling this real ball. It just felt so right to sort of like play it that way. I shot a little bit of footage playing Super Monkey Ball as well, and when I went to put that up on YouTube, I just photoshopped out the soccer ball and put in like a Super Monkey Ball. And I thought, I could actually build a Super Monkey Ball in place of the soccer ball. So that was kind of the idea. And then when Super Monkey Ball, is it Banana Rumble? The most recent kind of iteration was coming out. I thought, well, there'll be a bit of interest around the time that's actually released. I'd seen that was coming out. So I thought, I'll try and do something, in time for that. And I missed it a little bit. I was able to get sort of like the controller out. I didn't actually have the legs hooked up at that point. And I was thinking, will I just like make a little cardboard, II to go inside as a monkey? But then I thought, a 3D printed one is going to like do justice to the character. And from the outset, I thought I'd try and get the legs working. And when I managed to get those working, I was just kind of really pleased with the result. So that's been a lot of fun. So that would be the most recent thing where I just thought that's really cool. In terms of bringing joy to other people, it's most probably the Guitar Hero mod. We took that into some of the schools in northern Thailand for Science Week. And I hope I can say this on air, but at that time there was no downloadable content for PlayStation 2, and of course people went, I'm a Guns N' Roses fan, or I'm a Dire Straits fan, whatever it is. I want to put my songs, the songs I want to play, into the game. And so the modding community at that time, someone would go, I've just kind of worked out how to decompile the game. And then the next week someone's going, oh, I've worked out the image format. And then the next week someone's gone, okay, well, I've made a drag and drop interface where you can replace images in the game. So we actually went through and we kind of modded all of the graphics in the game to plug the university and things like that, and then took it into some Thai schools for Science Week. And the motivation there was, we had a pinball machine that we make out of an office table with an overhead data projector that's got some real buttons and a Mercury switch, so you can give it a hip and shoulder and those sorts of things. And 4 people can play that. We had the 2 PVC pipe cars hooked up to play Daytona USA, and so 2 people could play that. But at one of the schools we were going to, they said we're expecting 1,400 kids across 2 days.
Wow.
Wow.
And we thought, what do we do with 1,400 school students, And so I was just driving and I thought, well, what about if we took Guitar Hero and we split that out, and so we made 5 people, 1 guitar, we can have 10 people play. And so at the schools we went to, they had auditoriums available with a data projector and a sound system, and so we had 5 rows of 10 chairs, and the front row would play, and then they would peel off, and the people on the chairs behind them, they'd play one song, they'd peel off, and the kids would climb over the chairs till they got to the front row, and
I can imagine that got quite competitive, right? To me, that would be quite a competitive, 2 teams, 1 button. We know who's going to screw up, so you better be on top form.
The students loved it, so they would you'd hear them go, if they missed a chord or something like that, or if they hit a chord together, they'd go, yay! And the back of the auditorium was lined with people watching, waiting to get into the chairs. And so I think we had at least 1,500 kids play Guitar Hero across those 2 days, and it just went off. It was a lot of fun. That was a really great one. We also took that into an orphanage for babies with HIV and AIDS. Nice. A couple of times with some students for the university, so they could play, and we took the bamboo cars and the PVC cars and some things like that for them. But just giving the orphans a chance to play some of those things as well was fantastic. So
I'm glad you touched on that, because that was one of the things I saw from the TED Talk a while ago that I love, that you took the bamboo racing car into the orphanage, and the shot of the 3 children working together to do the steering wheel, the headphones, and the pedals. It's a beautiful moment, and it's I think you making that and taking those into those places and helping just create just joy was fantastic. And it's so nice to see that you took your work taking in, because it's great that I love the Game & Watch and I love the II controller, but I also was just really touched by that moment of you taking that in there, and the fact that your work puts a smile on people's faces and creates such joy is fantastic, and it's wholly something to be incredibly proud of every day, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, no, I enjoy it. The giant Game & Watch, it was so much fun just to see the looks on people's faces, particularly from my generation. And so, kids would maybe recognise Mr. Game & Watch from some of the Smash Brothers games. But, the adults were just like, wow, I'd forgotten about playing sort of Mickey Mouse tennis or whatever it was. Or, that's right, I had Donkey Kong at school, or is it still in a cupboard somewhere? But just the smiles on their faces, and people were just like, how did you do this? This is incredible. And if they wanted to look behind the curtain and just see the plywood and the laptop that was running it and so on, I would let them. But with kind of the caveat that, once you look behind the curtain, the magic's gone, sort of thing. But it was wonderful just to see the looks on people's faces, just to bring back some of those memories for folk. And it was a lot of fun. I do enjoy seeing other people appreciate these things.
That's why we love what we do as well, because Retro Dodo, the whole idea, the ethos behind the brand is nostalgia. The joy you get from seeing a Dreamcast in a second-hand store, the joy you get from getting on your N64 and playing Donkey Kong again, or plugging the NES in and hearing the startup sounds. So we connect with that a lot. That that joy, that kind of, remembering those retro feelings again, helping to share those retro vibes with new audiences as well. Like, we connect with it a lot. It's fantastic.
That's
I think
very
Brandon looks like he's poised for a question. I recognise.
Sorry, I'm looking at. So we've got in some questions from our audience that I wanted to share with you. One rounds off this quite nicely from Albert Gutherman, who says, "I am a student who wants to get into computer engineering. Where should I start?"
Wow. Okay. My hardware side of things. I was working at that time working as a fax technician by day, and doing some trade level certificates for electronics, kind of in the evenings, which I really enjoyed. But to get some qualifications, which my work kind of wanted for me at the time. I guess if you want to get into computer engineering, then university is most probably sort of what you want to hit up. Find a good computer engineering course to get enrolled in. Find out about universities you want to shoot for or things like that, and have a look at some of the courses they offer. And hopefully there are some things in there to kind of to grab your interest and find out, is it robotics? Is it kind of some automation? Is it, designing circuits? What is it that, it excites you and inspires you?
We had another one from a user called Park2 Arcade on Threads that you kind of touched on already. You made a little joke about building the dual screen Game & Watch and how it might not go down very well with your wife. But their question was, like, how challenging is your career as a computer scientist, and how do you create a work-life balance? Obviously, I mean, you're doing the work and then you're coming home and you're creating, you've got your ideas that you want to use and build there. And obviously you've mentioned that you've got children that you've been, I know they're growing up now, but over the years you've been creating things for them to enjoy. But how hard is it to create a work-life balance? I think that's something that a lot of people who are possibly self-employed or working and trying to make a new career as like a modder or a hacker or something like that, they'd be interested to know how you kind of deal with that divide and how you manage that with your time. Yeah,
that's a great question. I think I saw, maybe it was on Reddit, someone had commented on one of kind of my recent creations and said, I wish I was this level of unemployed. It's kind of, I guess, a commentary on, like, how do you find the time to do this sort of stuff? A part of it, I guess, is a love for the things that I'm doing. And so, when I was building the giant Game & Watch, then I was getting up for an hour before work in the cold, sort of out in the garage, and crank the stereo, but it was cold out there, to build something. I love... software is very cool, and it's nice to make something and you see it, but I love kind of building physical things as well, things that you get to interact with or can look at in a way that you can't with a lot of software is intangible. So for me, I'm a full-time software developer, but I'm not working for myself. I work 9 to 5 essentially. I'm full-time remote. So, I don't have a commute. I'm in my 50s. I've got 2 grown-up kids, so I don't have, like, kids kind of at home. I love my wife, and I still got to spend, time kind of with my wife as well. So I think I most probably don't game as much as I would like to. Actually, just like playing games. But, if there's something cool that I want to build, I tend to get, I wouldn't say hyper-focused, but sort of on a project, and if there are problems to solve in that'll be bubbling away in the background for me. But I will make time of an evening to spend an hour here, a couple of hours there, kind of on those things. And I feel like as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at going, okay, well, I'll do that over a couple of months rather than I'll try and build it out in a week. So I guess, using the time that's available there. I'm a grandfather now, so I've got two grandsons, and so that's fun for being really hands-on with them as well. But yeah, I mean, particularly for you, Brandon, as a father with a young child, then you know how kind of all-consuming that is. So part of it might be stage of life, although, for me, that's been like 25 years or more now that I've been sort of like, I guess, doing some of these things since I first did that first kind of Wonder Boy sort of like hack. And having said that, maybe I haven't always I'm sure my wife would say that, I spend far too long with my projects covering our kitchen table or taking up half of our kitchen table for weeks or months at a time until the next project runs around. So she has been very
giving her a bit of a break.
She might have a more realistic idea on how much time I actually spend on these things, because to me it's fun. I'm doing it because I love it.
Yeah. The last question I want to ask you, Tom, and one that was asked by multiple people across our socials is, can they buy your II Super Monkey setup?
Wow.
That's a question that we've seen a lot, Tom.
Is this the next retro Dodo kind of like gaming item? You're going to be producing monkey balls. If anyone is genuinely interested in, I must have that II. I don't have a lot of space here, and it would end up sort of on one of my shelves. So if everyone thinks, I must have that, then if they want to get in contact with me, and I'll have my monkeys talk to their monkeys, and we'll thrash something out. So
there we go. Look.
If people are genuinely interested, I would think about, if someone loves Super Monkey Ball that much, then perhaps it should be theirs. They'd be very welcome to get in contact with me.
What's the best way they can get in contact with you, Tom?
They can find me on. It's a good question. They'd be very welcome to just email me, dr.tom.tilley@gmail.com. Send me an email.
Lovely. Well,
Amazing.
Thank you very much for hopping on the podcast, Tom. We'll let you get off to spend some time with your wife. I bet she's counting down the minutes now.
And my grandson's actually here in the background somewhere as well. I was hoping we'd have a BBC moment where he sort of like bursts through the door with my wife sort of like trailing after.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I thought it might come flying past on a hover vacuum,
hovercraft,
but it's not happened yet. So I've been hoping this entire thing that we just see him hovering behind, you just grab something off the shelf and then just hover back again. But maybe next time.
That'd be very cool. Yeah, well,
Thanks,
thank you,
Tom.
gentlemen. It's a pleasure talking with you. Thanks very much for the invite.
It's been incredible. Thank you very much for being here with us.